on, get it going. Call this meeting of the City Council, January 25th, 2022 to order. Tracy, could you please roll call, please?
Harrington.
Here.
Sittig.
Here.
Smith.
Here.
Wason.
Here. All right, we've got a lot on the agenda. Does anyone, can we get an approval of this agenda? There's nothing that I know of that needs to be changed.
So moved.
I'll second.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Item 4, let's get right into the budget. Let these guys get home out in the audience. Ryan, I'm going to hand it over to you, and could you shepherd this through for us
Sure,
tonight?
thank you. What I'd like to do this evening is just kind of recap briefly what we discussed last week, or I guess more so what I understood the takeaways were in the direction we were headed, and then talk some about capital projects, the non-equipment, basically capital projects, and we have some department heads here that will assist in that conversation as well. So from a recap standpoint, the general fund, we are planning to use about $775,000 of our $1.5 million fund, our 2021 fund balance, to cover some costs in FY23. And remember, this $1.5 million is above and beyond the about $4.5 million we have in a reserve that meets our 30% requirement in our fund balance policy. We're also proposing to use $150,000 of ARPA money for the social service contributions that come out of the general fund. That would, with that, going back to the fund balance model that you have in the worksheet, we would have about $790,000 that would still need to be assigned by this group at some point. That doesn't have to happen tonight, but at some point we need to have that discussion because by policy it needs to be assigned. From a utility standpoint, in water we showed two models there, one with rate increases as proposed previously, the other with no increases. It was my understanding that obviously we want to shoot for the no increases in the coming year, rate increases that is, and potentially look for a capital project or two that could be funded with ARPA to keep those rates down in the long term. And so that, if that's the consensus, we'll look at that and come back to you later this year prior to the start of the fiscal year. Nothing significant to report in sewer. Again, that fund is sitting pretty well. There's no rate increases being proposed. Stormwater, on the other hand, we talked about the fact that staff is working on a proposal to restructure those rates to get it more in line with the best practices that are used across the country, really, for stormwater billing. We hope to have something to you late this spring for your consideration. And then lastly, road use tax. Again, that fund is in really good condition. We saw revenues in FY21 come in much higher than anticipated. We continue to shift funding from that fund into what we call our street repair program so that we can pay for street repairs with cash on hand. So that was my understanding of a real high-level understanding of last week's discussion. And so tonight, really, the objective is to talk about the capital projects that are identified with the yellow shading in the CIP and how we plan or intend to fund those projects. So I think what I'll do is just go right down the list. And then as we get to specific projects where department heads are in the audience to speak, I'll ask them to come up. But the first one, and I noted this in an earlier correspondence, is the City Hall project. And while this is in here, there's still a number of approvals that would need to happen to really move forward with construction of this. Before any of that happens, we'd like to present to the City Council on February 8th an update of that project. I think you saw it when we were at maybe 25% design, or maybe even less than that, Kevin.
Less, it was at the concept phase.
That's right, concept phase. So now we're at about 60% design. We have some costs coming in. I mentioned that inflation is playing a factor here. So we'd like to go over some of those details with you at the February 8th meeting. So I don't, unless there's something very imperative, I don't know that we need to spend a lot of time on that tonight. So the next category would be fire, and we have the chief here this evening. He's got two projects on this list. The first is replacing our air compressor fill station that you can see here was 1998 model, and then the fire training project using shipping containers. And so, Chief, if you'd maybe talk through both of those projects briefly. Be helpful.
Our current compressor fill station that we use to fill our air pack bottles up, for lack of more formal terms, it's 1998. We're seeing an increasing amount of repair costs. In fact, last year we have to undergo quarterly air testing in order to remain NFPA compliant. We actually failed a test last year. Simply because the equipment is becoming more inefficient and it's running longer, which means the filters are becoming oversaturated, which means more repairs. So it's kind of a domino effect kind of thing. And so it's harder and harder to find parts for this thing. So it's just the end of its life. We did write a AFG grant for the replacement of it. We just pressed the send button on that about a month ago. And so we're hopeful that all the city really has to pay is the 10% match, which would equate to be somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000. So we think we wrote a really good grant for this. We've tried this in the past. We weren't successful, but I think we took a different stab at this, and we stand a better chance. So any questions about that particular project?
I would just note that while we're hopeful for the grant, we're planning as if we're not going to get that. And so the funding for this particular project would be coming out of the Fire Capital Fund.
To me, this is it's a safety thing. It really is a must that, I mean, this is the air they're breathing when they go into IDLH atmospheres, and you don't want it questioned, is my take. So
how long would it take to replace it when the new one was here?
We've already requested some bids on different models, and we suspect sometime in the fall we could have it done.
And then how long would it actually take to swap out?
Probably within a couple of days. Once we get the unit here, we would just take an electrician. It's a 3-phase system, just to set it, hook it up, because it actually comes on 2 stands, and they just move it in and hook it right up. So not long at all.
And so no downtime?
No, not at all. Nope. All right, the next project is our fire training project, and many of you probably remember 2 years ago I was here and we spoke about the prospect of spending over $300,000 simply for infrastructure costs at the wastewater plant just to put a training facility in place. In the meantime, 2 years have passed and we hired a training officer. She has brought us down to ground zero and really kind of helped us look at just what our needs are. And so strategically, we thought about not only some of the foundation level training needs, but as well as the placement of said facility. And what we came up with was the use of shipping containers to put together to incorporate a lot of different training elements. Many departments across the country are kind of looking at these kinds of options simply because they're a lot more affordable. They're scalable. We can build them bigger. We can move them around. If we have to, abandon a location, we can do that. So we really feel like this is something that we can get up and use fairly quickly. It's not something that we have to do a lot of work with infrastructure and then, look down the road at possibly raising funds, or doing some fundraising for a training facility. This is a much lower cost, much more practical option, and one that allows us to get right after it, frankly. We do have one shipping container on order right now. I worked with both Michael to locate that at the Public Works campus, and I think we've got a pretty good area where we can put that footprint. And the idea here is to locate another 2 shipping containers there, so we'll have 3 total, and that will allow us to do hose deployment drills, search mazes. We even want to build a vertical ventilation prop on top. Our Firefighters Foundation has already approved the purchase of an $8,000 forcible entry prop that will go along with this initial container. So things are moving in that direction. And then also within this project, in working with Drew, we looked at the possibility of stacking two containers and providing us or allowing us the opportunity to have a burn, not necessarily burn facility, but the ability to burn ordinary combustibles so that we can get our new firefighters in heat. We have many firefighters that have never been in a burning building. And so currently, right now, our option is to use Coralville's facility, but you can all imagine what it's like to try to backfill firefighters and then send all of our resources into Coralville to train. It's just not very practical, and to be honest with you, it puts me a little uneasy about that. So that's really the project as it stands. We just feel that this is a better approach, and as we continue to turn people over and over and over again, we don't have experience, and so training is really where we need to be concentrating, and so this will help us with a lot of that.
Do you guys have any questions for Chief?
Chief, will this assist in training to your Fire 1 and Fire 2 levels with at grade, above grade, and below grade?
Absolutely. The stacked container that we want to locate down at wastewater will let us check that box for sure. And the other thing that this does too is as we build this out and get to a point where it's very usable, the next time we do have an ISO audit, we can look at this as a training facility, and we get a lot of credit for training hours at a facility. So we stand to gain in that regard as well.
I can appreciate the fact that you guys took a step back and reevaluated your approach in not having like a standalone facility. And also just listening to you talk about it, the flexibility and opportunity to change it to make it more realistic about, in terms of the places that firefighters will have to enter, and will they be prepared for that? And it saves a lot more money.
Absolutely, yeah. Captain Humpston is, she's made us be a little more humble and practical, so it's a good thing. She's doing good work.
I do have one question.
Yeah.
In terms of the other units that you talked about, what's the time frame? Like, if you order them, like what's the time frame of them arriving?
That's a great question, and unfortunately, as you can imagine, with today's world and shipping issues, we're noticing the price of these containers going up. They're about $1,000 to $1,500 higher than they were even a year ago. And so we are having trouble locating them. We're actually going through a broker right now on the West Coast in order to find the one that we found. And so that's a little tricky, but Captain Humpston has been working with different vendors, and she has her eyes on a few other areas that we can look at. So but that's a great question.
Chief, is this something that that Michael and Streets or the confined space team in town would be able to utilize for training with an above, tripod entry, things like that, where multiple departments are going to get use out of it?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially in one of the containers, we'd like to put a railing around the entire thing, have a hole in it so that we can utilize the tripod and practice lowering and that kind of thing. We've also considered how maybe the police department can use this in doing their searches and going in and do what they do. So I certainly think this could be something that multiple departments can use and benefit from.
Then will they be able to have enough stuff to ventilate them in a hurry if something goes awry and
Sure. Yeah.
flood the area so that
Yeah,
just for
the
safety and-
facility that we're going to have at the Public Works campus will only use theatrical smoke just because we're in a neighborhood. But the facility that we have down at wastewater, that's something that we're going to have to put topside hatches in and things like that so that we can evacuate the heat and the smoke very quickly.
Great questions. Anything else? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. And that project, $42,000 will be funded through the capital project fund, which we have a balance there, so. Okay, next up is park projects, and we have a handful of projects here, and our Parks Director, Guy Goldsmith, is here tonight as well. I'm gonna just run through these briefly. We have the Babe Ruth Field Backstop, and this is a relatively new, somewhat new, I should say, because of the improvements we're doing on Dubuque Street. And those bleed over into the parking lot. We're actually gonna improve that whole area. As a result, we think we need to do something with this backstop to prevent the vehicles that'll be, to prevent potential damage from the vehicles that'll be parking there. In addition to that, at the Babe Ruth Field, Guy would like to upgrade the restroom concession area, and I'll let him talk a little bit more about that. I will say that while this field has been underused over the past few years, Guy's had some conversations here recently, and we anticipate seeing an uptick in the usage of that facility. And those projects are proposed to be funded with the backstop out of franchise fee fund and the restroom concessions area, 50% out of the franchise fee and 50% from hotel motel. The big one that we've been talking about for a lot of years at Centennial Park is the pavilion and splash pad. I mentioned in an earlier correspondence that we've assembled a small group to start talking about this project. It's kind of been on the shelves for a while. Getting some of our other partners involved, like the CVB, to help us from a marketing standpoint, from a fundraising standpoint in particular, to really make this a special project. What would need to happen first, after some additional meetings with that group, I suspect we'd want to go into some sort of design so that we have something we can present to potential sponsors and/or grant in-grant applications. And so we're looking to push that project forward. And then in conjunction out there at Centennial Park, Guy's been talking a long time about an ADA playground, and I'll let him talk a little bit more about the ins and outs of that, but that project is proposed to be funded with franchise fee. Two projects that we've seen on this list for a long time: improvements in parking at Penn Meadows on that north end. Again, both projects proposed to be funded with the new revenue of a franchise fee. And then a few years ago, we put together a plan to fill in gaps where we didn't have trails, or we had maybe areas where we needed to extend a trail. And so we put together a fairly detailed plan. This is just moving ahead with that plan. This one section would widen currently a 4-foot sidewalk to 8 feet, and it's the only section in between. It's a fairly long section. I think it's almost 1,500 feet in between two 8-foot paths. So we need to, it goes 8 foot, 4 foot, 8 foot. So we're looking to make that all 8 foot. And I believe we are proposing to fund that with a future GO bond. So that's a real high-level explanation of some of the park capital projects. And Guy, I'm sure, is eager to answer your questions, talk through it a little bit more.
Guy, tell us about that playground, ADA. It will be the first of its kind in North Liberty?
Yes. It's kind of the last piece of the pie at Centennial Park with the playground. It's going to be located near the traditional playground area to the west of that. It still will be kind of connected. It's a swing that you can actually put a wheelchair in, a merry-go-round that is ground level that you can wheel a wheelchair onto it and actually use it, and maybe some other components. But those are the two main ones I want to concentrate on. We have gotten a lot of requests for such items, and it's something that we've had on the back burner for a number of years now, and I think it's time to probably finish it off if we can.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's very important.
Yeah. You guys have questions for Guy on any of these projects?
Can you share anything about your why we're going to see an uptick in use of the Babe Ruth field?
The Babe Ruth Field, yes. So I believe this is the second year COVID actually, kind of interrupted, but NLCBS, they're kind of working their way into that program. Hopefully to see some more usage there. And also the high school is a factor now. We've been approached this year for 2 JV teams to practice on the field. Along with all the other requests that we get, we believe that the Babe Ruth field is going to start seeing a lot more usage.
I can speak a little to that, outside of here being on a baseball board. Our teams have been requesting for a number of years access to that field, and there's kind of a newfound partnership with a number of teams, organizations to maximize field usage outside of what the high school's usage is. You know, in the summer when the high school's out, classes, they're using it during the day, and then the evenings are left open for you know, when typical baseball practices and games are. And so I think you'll see a lot more teams utilizing that space.
So I did want to comment on the backstop. It's not like we're removing a fairly new backstop. It's old. It's pretty much due to be replaced anyway. However, this project just kind of falls right in line with what's going on with the Dubuque Street project. With the orientation of the new parking lot, it's going to be somewhat directly be very close to the backside of that. Afraid of foul balls. This is probably the time to enhance that so we can prevent some of those accidents.
Well, and even now, when you pull into that parking lot, you don't think about that until you're sitting there enjoying the ball game and your car is hit.
Yeah, we're not saying it's going to
It's
prevent
really
everything,
close.
but we need to do something to help.
So is the backstop an actual fenced? Is it going to be a net? Is it going to be a combination that extends it higher? How does it work?
Yeah, we've contemplated both ways, the net system or something like at Quail Ridge Park, which is much larger, has a little higher with a big overhang to help some of those foul balls come up.
So we can have Michael make us a sign, beware, park here at your own risk.
Yeah, that's right.
First sign.
Are you taking orders for signs? Sounds like it.
I have a whole list of
Terrific.
started off with.
Terrific. I didn't know that, Brian. That's good.
You want me to just kind of run down through some of these, or do you just want to ask questions?
I think I'm good, guy. I know this list.
So the Penn Meadows, the north parking lot needs to get resurfaced because it's,
Yeah,
and
it's
then we're just, at the same time, we'll just move it west a little bit more.
Yep. Like a bay west is what the proposal is right now. We're thinking maybe 30, 35 car bay expansion.
Yep. Is there a tree there?
Yeah, I believe there is an older tree. So between the parking lot and the shelter that's there, that's where that bay is going to fit in. And also this will give us a second entrance exit to Penn Meadows Park on the north side.
Is there any chance at DNR grant funds with impermeable pavement like we've done in the past? Kind of looking towards Tracy because, I mean, grant-wise,
Typically, they have to be a stormwater quality special project. I don't know that there are any of those sitting out there right now, ripe for the taking.
Kevin and I had actually just talked about this earlier. I don't know if you have anything more you want to say about it or
About the,
During
pavers
permeable pavers.
on the parking.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea because we are concerned with the amount of runoff that's running to the west there.
Yep.
We can get a tile line to go to the storm sewer on Penn Street. So actually, I brought a sketch with me tonight. That guy and I are going to talk about that as a potential for permeable pavers, at least in the parking areas. See what that would do to the budget. It'll increase
It
it
would change it.
some.
Yeah, it changes some.
How does that change the maintenance budget?
Yeah.
How does it change the maintenance budget?
Well,
You don't want to spread a lot of sand on it. I can tell you that.
yeah. I mean, how often do you clean? You don't clean Centennial at all.
Not currently, but you
Yeah,
know,
right.
as soon as we get the facility out there, we will.
Yeah, that's
So
true
we're not-
because you'll have people parking more often.
Yeah.
So.
And I would anticipate that section would stay covered all winter. We have plenty of other parking lots that would cover any event that we'd have during the winter time.
Yeah.
As of right now.
because we've had there's been a lot of standing water in that section and there's been runoff issues with neighbors there in the past, right?
Yeah, I believe so. Michael could speak to that better, but yeah,
Yep.
we have had. some-
And the trail went through from the north to the south, the west side of Penn Meadows Park. It kind of bermed it up there. So we have some culverts underneath, not huge, but it does slow the water down, which we want, but it also backs the water up into the park for a while.
And to your question about grant money, we actually, and Tracy and Kevin have been involved in this too, where there is some funding out there. I'm not sure it would be applicable here, and we'll get into it next, or in a couple weeks when we talk about our City Hall project, because we have some significant underground detention there. We think we can take advantage of a sizable grant, at least that's our hope, specific for stormwater. I'm not sure it would benefit this project, though.
We'll always look for those opportunities, though.
Any other questions for Guy? Okay. Guy, thanks for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
If I could do a quick check, you've seen how we're proposing to fund these projects with the franchise fee and the hotel motel tax. Any heartburn with that? I think that's, at least my interpretation is that's, and we approve the franchise fee with it going specifically to park projects. Are we good with what we're seeing so far?
That's made this a lot easier to swallow. sure.
Is the 3.5 though, is that the entire amount, or is that anticipating raising funds, or is raising funds going to lower that number?
I think that, I don't know that we can answer that just yet. That's a number that's been in there for the last couple of years. I think we have a couple variables, including the inflation, cost of materials. So hold tight on that. We'll be coming back to talk to you. But I think the original thought was the 3.5 was the whole thing, and we would fund some of it and hopefully get some sponsorships or fundraising for a portion of it. I don't think 3.5 is going to do it for what we're talking about out there. Okay, we'll move on to our proposed street projects for FY '23. And Michael is here and Kevin also. You're very familiar already with the North Jones Boulevard project. We're moving forward with design. We anticipate a portion of that to be covered by the developer who's currently moving dirt out there. We're hopeful that that'll start this spring and be completed by the end of the year. This Ranshaw Way 965 Shoulders project has been in the CIP for quite some time. And this is further north, 240th Street and north, just to widen those shoulders. So there's some kind of a shared pathway there. And then finally, we're talking about the reconstruction of West Penn Street. And this would be a joint project with the county. And as I mentioned in earlier correspondence, we're going to be meeting with the county in early February to talk a little bit more about viability of this project and how it might be cost shared. So I'll stop there and let you pepper Michael with questions.
So the shared edge, I guess I'm not following it. Obviously, it's an extension of the roadway, but what's the purpose of that?
So there's a couple purposes. A good example of this would be similar to what the county has done going to the north to Cedar Rapids as they repave that
Okay.
extra safety strip.
Okay.
Another example would be North Liberty Road when that was constructed. As you go out North Liberty Road, you've got a shoulder edge there. Two major reasons for this are driver safety and traffic, as far as you've got gravel right up next to the edge of the current pavement. What this helps with is during the rain events, really wet events where that gravel gets blown out on the edge and you end up with a drop off. And then a tire hooks that corner and they lose control. Second, maintenance. It helps with maintenance since you've got a solid surface there. You don't have that blowout. You don't have that edge, and requires less maintenance to pull that gravel. I'm sure you guys have seen my team out pulling the gravel along Rancho Way, and so those would be the two big improvements on this.
So are you talking about putting an asphalt down on the shoulders then, Michael?
That's correct.
Because that's all an asphalt surface from almost 240th Street, but not quite. It's concrete up there past the church, but then it goes asphalt
Correct.
until corporate limits.
Correct.
Inside of this, I've noticed that portion of the road is kind of like being on the ocean now this winter. Will that settle down this summer as it expands out, or do you think that these shoulders will? I don't know, how will it interact with that existing asphalt that's there? That seems to be getting some ripple to it.
So as it ages, obviously your roads are not as smooth as day one.
Yeah.
And that's thaw cycle. It will smooth out some during the springtime, but it's never going to go away until it resurface.
Okay.
So
Okay.
it's just part of the age of I've got more wrinkles than I did earlier. So.
Yeah. Join the club.
So with future resurfacing projects of the bumpy road,
There you go. Yeah.
does that mean that the edges will have to be redone again as well during that same time?
So it would probably be evaluated at that time, not necessarily because it's an edge. It doesn't have your high volume traffic on it. It should handle the wear and tear longer than what your main routes would.
Okay.
So
Taking it easy on him. Any other questions? Just a few things on there. So.
I think we talked about the other one, like North Jones Boulevard.
Yeah. All right, you appear to be off the hook, Michael.
all right. Thank
Although
you.
the next project, just stick around. You don't have to stand there. Stay in the room.
Okay. That's good.
And I will note, this, we're tackling some big projects right now with Rancho Way Phase 5, with Dubuque Street, that'll be starting here shortly. I think our next Rancho Way project is in FY '25-ish, is when federal funding becomes available. And that hopefully then will be our last piece of Rancho Phase 5. So the last project on here is one you heard Michael talk a little bit about, and Greg actually, at the last council meeting, and that is the GIS mapping of our stormwater system. And as we previously noted, we have water and sewer completed. Stormwater is the most expensive piece of this because there are so many data points. We're asking you to consider to use some ARPA money for this in the amount of about $200,000. And we could then have a complete, all of our utilities on GIS mapping, and then the updates, as Greg, I think, noted at the last meeting, we're doing ourselves as developed.
Can I ask how the 200,000, that number, how was that determined?
When we did the first two phases, we got estimates from the company that, we actually went out and researched several companies, and then this company was the lowest price, so we went with them. And this number is a little bit higher than their initial estimate of 190,000, simply because so much time has passed.
Mhm.
But it's based on previous bid from
Okay.
For me, it was really compelling hearing Greg talk about it last time of, how it's brought him really, quite frankly, out of the Stone Age of having to go to multiple buildings to grab paper maps in a hurry and try to find things. It's changed the way he's done business, and it sounds like it's much more efficient, and probably over time pays for itself. So
I agree.
Okay, so thank you, Michael, I
Yep.
appreciate that.
Yep.
I want to take a couple minutes so we've just talked about the projects. We've talked a little bit about how they would be funded and using some of the franchise fee, the hotel motel, the ARPA money. I want to draw your attention to a couple of the spreadsheets in the back. One of them is called Tax Increment Financing Summary, and one of them is called General Obligation Summary. And I know some of you have seen these year after year, so sorry to be repetitive, but I think it does show some important data. And I would call your attention to the far left on the TIF page where we're looking at TIF valuation. And you can see that here our recent trend has been to reduce our reliability on TIF valuation. And what that does is when we reduce that, that decouples from TIF and goes into the general fund tax base. And so that is helpful when we're trying to fund operational services. And so you can see through this model that we're continuing in FY23. We take a pretty substantial drop, and then we'll start to level off yet. But we're a far cry away from one of our higher years in 21 at that 209 million. So I feel pretty good about that, and this factors in all the projects we just talked about, as well as everything you see in the FY23 through 27 CIP. So, well, let me stop there. Any questions on that particular spreadsheet? So then I'm going to jump over to the general obligation summary. And this is this also shows, if you look all the way over to the left, our debt service valuation. And that number generally grows each year. Oops, I didn't update the calculation there. 3% I don't think is accurate, but you saw in 22 it increased almost 4%. And so when that value goes up, then in our bond payments remain the same, then the tax rate goes down. And so you can see after the valuation growth, that's all of our current debt, and then we have a projected GO debt going down the future, again, based on all the projects that are in that CIP. And then if you go all the way over to the right, you can kind of see the tax rate. In this case, most of these are estimated or proposed, and there are a lot of variables in here, obviously. But this year, the tax rate is 122, which is a drop by 20 cents from last year. So the general fund and special levies all remain the same. What really is the variable is the debt service levy. And that's coming down this year because we're using some cash on hand that we have to buy down that debt. And then you can see based on upcoming projects what this tax levy may do. Again, I say may because we don't know what the valuation is going to do. And so there's some wiggle room there, and you can see it goes down a little bit, then comes back up. I think if this group is okay with it, as we plan for this, we'll actually try to keep it somewhat consistent, so no 1 year is a big up or down swing. That's a conversation for next year, most likely. But hopefully this kind of gives you a snapshot of what we can expect in the future. And again, this is an estimate. If a project doesn't move forward, or if a project comes in over cost, or if the tax value goes up or down, it all changes, but this gives us a pretty good idea. So with all that said, if you flip to, I think it's 2 pages from here, there's a summary called Property Tax Analysis. You can see in FY23 what the proposed tax rate is of 1132. That's a 20-cent drop from the current year. And again, we all know why the current year is at 1152. But that should that then gets us down to about what we were projecting this year last year at this time for FY23. And then the charts below it just show you what it does to residential and commercial property taxes. So I'll stop there and see if there are any questions.
Ryan, you said that you forgot to update the percentage of increase in valuation. Is that right? Did I understand you right, that you just didn't update that in here? Do you know what that
Just,
number is?
Eric, what I was referring to was, if you look at, on the general obligation, if you look at FY '23 there, on the general obligation summary, you see the debt service value of 1.217.
Yeah.
That 3%, I don't think that formula is updated, so I don't think it's, the value itself is correct.
Okay.
But the percentage, I think, I need to go in and adjust.
That's just what I was wondering, if the
Okay.
value was correct or not.
Yeah, the value is correct.
Thanks for spending some time on that. It's confusing. And I would ask that you guys, when you have one-on-ones with Ryan, dig into a little bit the TIF versus general obligation funding, and and why it's important for us to pay attention to both of them. They act differently to the tax rate. So this took me a couple of years to figure out, and I'm still not savvy with it, and that's why I'll ask you to talk with Ryan about this to help you along as needed. Otherwise, though, do you guys have any questions so far over what Ryan just went over?
So for me to talk it through, in my mind, the property tax analysis, getting back to 1132, which is where we should have been, where we want to be,
Right.
is including after funding the projects in the current proposed budget for FY '23.
Yes.
And then, hence the question a couple of times, and I've learned this from you, Mayor, in questioning our previous mayor, is, what are you foreseeing or projecting for the debt service levy? Is there anything on the foreseeable horizon that's going to affect that? And I think that question was always well stated and timed when we are looking at what our bond ratings are and keeping them where they are. So I didn't ask that well. Is there anything on the horizon with the debt service levy that we're concerned about that we need to forecast here, knowing what we know with this budget? That's my question.
I guess my response would be, I think, if you take a look at the general obligation spreadsheet and look at tax rate all the way over to the second to last column to the right, you can kind of see, based on everything in that CIP, what it's projected to do. So next year, again, based on what we know now, that particular tax rate would go down 10 cents. And then the year after that, it'd go down 21 cents. But then the year after that, it'd pop up 31 cents. And so and we could do that, or if folks are more comfortable with let's just keep the rate the same, so that in FY, whatever it is, 25 or 26, we're not seeing that 31-cent increase. Instead, it'd be the same as it is now. And so that's what we'll play with, for lack of a better word, next year.
Next year, yeah.
Is a lot of that with budgeting for the backfill loss?
Not really. Very little of it. The big impact here is when debt comes off and when debt goes on. And so next year, we're not really bringing it, we're showing no new debt coming on. And we're showing a couple come off, a couple big ones, almost $600,000 come off. So, that makes a big difference. It's all about timing, really.
And obviously with a large city hall project being teed up, when are we going to see debt from that coming in? do you think?
So, good question, and I don't think I brought that. Tracy and I have a spreadsheet that projects debt out through almost 2030, and because we have such a significant, because we have a nice reserve, we're able to cash flow these projects almost, depending on the project, the whole way through. And so right now, the City Hall project would be proposed to be borrowed in 2 installments, same what we did with the police department. I believe the first installment wouldn't come on until FY '23, which would make that first quarter of '24-ish is when we borrow. The following year, we borrow the second. This model also shows a new fire station. So that's why you're seeing, I think that's 25, 26. So 2 big projects back to back.
And I think it's reasonable to look at the tax rate for debt service, contemplating taking it down to 122 this year. It may be a reasonable thing to do, but it might be reasonable just to leave it there next year in this budget conversation, because coming up in FY '26, it will go back up to eventually 122. So it might prevent a large increase at that point in time and just smooth this out. It's difficult to get too many years down the road on the tax rate and contemplating, but the more we can iron out those ups and downs, the easier it will be.
What are our options for using those funds then? I mean, this is a debt service levy, so it has to be used to pay off debt.
Yeah. So to Chris's point, now we're really getting into the weeds. We might have to adjust a different levy
That's kind
a
of what I was
little
wondering.
bit, and then come back to that debt service levy, but be prepared to drop that general fund levy or whatever it might be.
And you've just stumbled onto my Achilles tendon with the budget, Eric, in your first meeting here for a second. Okay.
And then you're always looking for options for refinance that's advantageous to us, and
Yes, in fact, Tracy and I were just talking about this the other day, and we're hopeful that we were talking with Tiana, who I think most people around here know, looking at selling in the late first quarter. I think we have something from a 2015 bond that she thought might be refinanceable.
Brian, I have your debt sheet up if you want me to give you the full answer.
Sure.
We would borrow for the first half of City Hall in 2024 and the second half in 2025. So it would fully be on the tax rolls for levy in '26.
Okay.
And that's fiscal '26, not calendar '26.
Correct.
Well, I think I have, unless there are any objections to what we've talked about tonight, I have what we need to bring forward the documents for official approval of the FY '23 budget. And while you chew on that for a second, I would just say that I think I mentioned earlier on, the 2 models that we still will have to spend some time on that aren't necessarily relevant so much to the FY '23 budget documents are the fund balance allocation, the general fund balance allocation, and the ARPA funds. And I know we'll probably have discussions about that for months ahead. So just know that we'll have some more discussions on both of those.
so, and just to be clear, for this fiscal year '23, the levy will be 1132.
Thank you for that clarification. That
No,
is-
we will be responsible.
Yes.
I just want to make sure that,
Assuming that's what you approve, that's what will be in the documents.
Okay.
Yes.
Mistake we'll make once.
Yeah.
Well, we're right alongside of you on that one, so that's
Yep.
that's
So-
Brian's point also.
yep,
This,
we,
this isn't on YouTube.
we're on notice.
Right. Right.
So,
All right. Thank you all. Good questions on that. I might offer to take a 5-minute recess here. Let you guys get out of here if you want to, clear out the room, reset our minds, and reconvene, in 5 minutes. So it's 6:55. We'll reconvene here to get into our regular council session.
See you later.
thanks.
Thank you all. Have a good night.
Yeah. Yeah.
Owning groupies.
Yeah, I know.
I need to gavel out, gavel back in? Anything? We good, Grant?
Not in the rules.
All right. All right, good. Let's move on to item number 5 is the consent agenda. Is there anything on there that you guys want to pull out and talk about individually? All right, hearing none. Could I get a motion for consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded, and all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Item 6 is time reserved for public comment. For anything that's not on the agenda, if you are welcome to bring it to our attention. I'll open that up. Yes, sir. If you could just state your name and address for us on the way up, please.
Absolutely. My name is Andrew Gilpin. The property address is 70 Heritage Drive.
Okay.
It's regarding drainage from drainage, I believe, from 965 and west of 965.
Okay.
I've been in communication with Mike Wolf over the last 5 years regarding the issue. I believe, I don't know, maybe a couple of you have actually been out to the property to walk it a few years back, maybe not. But we walked the property. The issue is initially we've owned the property for 15 years. When we first bought the property, you could literally stride across the stream, across the property,
Okay.
and it's now almost 20 feet across. So Mike assures me, and a few other people have told me that anything that's done for construction has to be mitigated or controlled in some way or another. I feel otherwise. I feel like there's a lot more flow going through there. And so I'm just not sure how to proceed. You guys have, I think, increased the funding from initially it was only like $750, I think, for cost share. And I've increased that up to $5,000. But I've had estimates just to do some landscaping just on my property, and that's $12,000, and that's actually to remove and slope the property closer to the house, which is already the issue. It's cutting in towards the house.
Okay.
And this is affecting potentially 13 homes or 13 properties just through that area. Also, it's been taking out like self-sloping utility boxes and stuff like that. So
Okay.
I've got a note I'm planning to pass out to other residences or neighbors around there to see if anybody else. I know for sure a couple of the neighboring properties have brought up issues with it also. And so Mike has helped out over the years trying to get me into communication with some people. We've had, like I said, a few people from the council walk it in the past. But since there's an easement on it, I can't really do anything to it myself. And I also can't do anything to anybody else's properties. So anything upstream of mine, if I do something to fix my property, then it's just gonna get ripped out, because if the person upstream from me doesn't want to do anything
Sure.
to assess that, then what can I do about it?
Okay.
You know what I mean? So it kind of puts it in a tricky spot. And then again, I think that I don't think this is a natural progression of the amount of water that's coming through. I think it's an increased amount, because that stream doesn't stay that way for who knows how long, and then all of a sudden over a 5 to 10 year time frame, it gets 10 times bigger than it was. I feel like something causes that to increase, and I think the only way for that to really happen is for increased drainage that runs through there.
Okay. Okay.
So I know for sure it's been on the city's sort of list of things to look at, but I don't really push it. I just haven't had the time to do it. So it's like once or twice or 3 times a year, I'll talk to Mike about it, and he'll kind of, talk to whoever he needs to talk to. But I just feel like it's not getting addressed, and it's getting to a point where it's going to become a structural issue to the actual home itself. And I couldn't care less if it floods a little bit, because it doesn't affect the house, at least my property. It certainly could affect flooding downstream from me. When we walked it with the city, the drains further downstream were completely plugged up. And so if these things aren't being maintained, that potentially causes a flooding issue for other homes. When I do bring up a specific complaint, the city's been very good about going in and taking care of it when they can. So
Okay.
there's stuff like that. But again, I can only really control what's going on on my property, but if there's an easement on the property and the city doesn't either maintain it or make sure somebody else maintains it properly, then it kind of affects, everybody else around them, so.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Well, if we're not already aware of it, Andrew, I think you
Yes,
said,
sir.
right?
Yep.
We'll be taking that information that you have here tonight and make sure that we get some follow-up
Sure, and
to
I
you.
can email, I've got photos from before and after and some other stuff. And then I just also wanted to point out that right before we bought the property, they actually buried the stream just across the street on Heritage Drive. So it'd be basically where the Casey's is on 965, the old one.
Mhm.
Literally right across 965 is where that runs through there. And they completely buried that and just left basically like a little swell pit or something. I don't know what you would call it.
Okay.
They left that open, but buried it. So the first place it comes out is literally right into these few properties that
Gotcha.
are right there.
Gotcha.
So
Okay. Yeah, if you can email us what you have, and we'll get this in front of the right city staff here, okay?
absolutely.
Okay.
I appreciate it.
Thank you for
guys.
coming.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Any other members of the public for comment tonight? All right, seeing none, I will close public comment, period. Item 7 is city engineer report. Kevin,
Okay, I have no report for you tonight.
what? Must be winter time.
I can fend off any questions if you have.
Put a
any
big old
questions.
no on my agenda here next to you. You guys want to hit Kevin with a question since he's got nothing for us?
I have a question.
Oh, there we go.
Just wondering if you notice any like traffic concerns or issues now that Casey's is open on the corner. Like, has traffic increased or like?
No one has complained, so, and I don't drive enough at peak hours around there to notice anything. I haven't heard of any issues. I don't know if anyone.
I haven't either. I'm a frequent user of Fairway and I've been to that Casey's a couple times now and I haven't noticed anything.
Mhm.
I don't think we've got any calls at City Hall.
Good. I'm just asking because I haven't heard or seen anything, and I do go that way quite
Yeah.
frequently, which is surprising. Like, I thought maybe there would be some congestion, but I haven't noticed any.
Yeah, it usually takes the public a little while to start navigating the new changes. We know the southbound where the right turn only into City Hall, people are still getting used to that, so that's
Yes.
going to take some time. But other than that, I haven't heard of any issues with the new improvements.
I think that right lane is like an express lane to City Hall. I love being over there. We're all conditioned to be in that left lane, and I just let them go. I want to be on the right lane.
They all look at us.
Yeah. Like, you're trying to get in front of me, aren't you? No, I'm not. I'm turning right here. All right, thank you, Kevin. Item 8, city administrator report. Ryan.
Thank you. Just two things tonight. One I already mentioned, and that is at the February 8th meeting, we will have Kevin and his team will be presenting an update on the City Hall project. And then Tracy and I are hopeful that the audit presentation will be ready for the February 22nd meeting. And it's a little bit later this year due to the software changeover, but we should have it ready for you here shortly.
Any questions for Ryan? Okay. Item 9 is mayor report. I'll give you a forewarning, this will be a little scattered, but it's also, I'm going to invite, I know Councilor Wason has something important to share with us here. Going forward, starting in that first meeting in February, I'm going to reserve some time for all of you for comments, things that you're doing on behalf of the city, things that you see on the calendar that you want to make us aware of, anything like that. So keeping it to city business, of course. So this will be the last time it's just me up there, but I'm also going to share some of this time right now. I don't know if you all got it. I think you may have. There's a few things on the calendar. Looking ahead towards the end of February, the University of Iowa is going to be installing President Wilson officially. Her installation ceremony will be on Friday, February 25th at 1 o'clock at Hansher Auditorium. It's open to the public, and if you're able to make it, not just us up here, but anybody out there in the audience for that. I mentioned 2 meetings ago that I would be taking part in Iowa League of Cities Mayors training. Did one of those 2 days after our last meeting, and then there's another one coming up this Thursday night regarding workforce here in Iowa. and I'll report back to you on that with anything I need to. And then in February, they have another one coming up as well. Brian and I will officially be at tomorrow night's MPO meeting. It is at 4:30 at the Johnson County Health and Human Services Building. If you're able to make it, it's open again to the public to sit in on and watch and listen. But we are 2 voting members of that committee for tomorrow night. And I'm going to turn the next one over to Councilor Wason. What's going on this weekend?
Beat the Bitter is going on this weekend. A lot of stuff's happening. On the 28th, there's some of the stuff in the Penn Meadows Park, some of the story walks, but I think kind of the big things this weekend is going to be the North Liberty Lights at Liberty Center Pond. That's lit up all the way around it. There's going to be a 5K or so run on the 29th. And then on Sunday is the Fire and Ice, and they're going to have the dancers, and the fireworks will be that night as well. Although I think that's going to be at Penn Meadows back again and stuff towards the east end of the park. So that's a lot of stuff, and I think they had little rides for that last year. The fire dancing was really pretty cool, and the fireworks are actually pretty good for the middle of the winter. And I encourage everyone to get out there. And I think the North Liberty Lights is actually on for a couple weeks. So you can just kind of go out there at night sometime and check it out.
Perfect. What's the website?
Beatthebitter.com.
Thank you. All right. Does anybody else have anything that's helpful from our calendars for the next 2 weeks?
No, but I just want to say I really enjoy listening to the radio when they talk about Beat the Bitter.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay. Item 10 is the North Liberty Community Pantry discussion. This is item A, resolution number 2022-04, a resolution approving the social services funding agreement between the City of North Liberty and the North Liberty Community Pantry, NLCP, a division of the North Liberty United Methodist Church. Could I get a motion just to open this up, please?
So moved.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded. I'm going to ask you to tell us what we're doing here with this. Give
Sure.
a good explanation in your report to us.
This would be the second official approval of ARPA money, and this agreement would gift the North Liberty Community Pantry $100,000 to help with their operating budget.
Can you say that again? How many dollars? I'm just giving you a hard time.
$100,000.
Thank you.
And the director is here tonight if you have any questions for her. But otherwise, this is actually an agreement form you've seen before when we had one in front of you from the DVIP. And these are the agreements we use moving forward on other with other social service agencies as we approve funding for them as well.
Kayla, would you mind coming up here and tell us what you were going to do with this newly found treasure?
You to repeat that amount for me as well, because it's amazing. Yes, we are super, super appreciative that you're even considering, allocating funding to the North Liberty Community Pantry, and we've, been around for 36 years, and you guys asked for a request for our immediate needs. So the expense sheet that we had attached are for some of those immediate needs. So it's divided up into service expenses that include food, wholesale food orders, and food bank food orders, as well as toiletries, clothing items that we distribute, detergent, toilet paper, all of those really essential items that we give out to families. And then in addition to that is some administrative and overhead costs that are really part of keeping our doors open. So there's some staff salary amounts in there, volunteer support, helping pay for our database that helps keep track of all of this data, supplies like grocery bags and cleaning supplies, PPE products, and then just utilities in general and keeping the refrigerators running and the lights on, doors open. So there's a full account of expenses, and again, it's just such an amazing amount of money that we could use very quickly. This is 6 months of expenses for FY22 for the pantry, and I'm very sure that we'll be able to spend through this and be able to accurately account for all those.
That's great. That was the question I had, is how much time does this buy you as far as buying produce, buying things that can be provided to the community?
Yeah, so this $100,000 is for the first 6 months of operating expenses. It's always hard to predict what else is going to come in the door and then what's not going to come in the door. So This is kind of a pretty safe bet that all of these costs are very stable, not they'll be there for the first 6 months. That's part of also why, the request is only for the first 6 months, because we talked about adding new programs. We talked about kind of expanding our outreach and doing different options to help the public based on what their needs are. So we haven't quite put all those features together yet. We don't have a lot of space to add a new program, but definitely something that we are talking about and need some board approval to move forward if we're going to expand our mission and some of our programming. So this will easily be spent in the first 6 months.
Terrific. You guys have any questions for Kayla? Or Don Blanks? Okay.
Awesome. Thank you
Good.
again so much. This is a huge, huge help to start our year.
Thank you for what you're doing and your services.
Yes,
Thank you.
that's the good work.
Okay. Tracy, would you mind taking a roll call and see if we can get rid of some of this money?
Smith,
Aye.
Siddick,
I abstain due to my position on the pantry board.
Wason,
Aye.
Harrington.
Aye.
Motion carries, 3 in favor, 1 abstention. And Eric, thanks for doing that. I failed to recognize that in the beginning. We talked about this earlier in the week, so thanks for doing that.
Thanks for your service there, Eric.
Item 11 is the Field Day Brewing Company site, and item A, staff and planning commission recommendations.
This is just under a 21,000 square foot restaurant and microbrewery there located on Liberty Way, just west of the Liberty Pond. Planning Commission did review it and recommended approval of it. Staff recommends approval as well. I know the applicant's here. If you have any questions, happy to answer any questions as well.
Does anybody have any questions for Russ? We actually have an agenda item next for the applicant as well. Anything specific for Russ?
I just, I'm going to ask you to answer the question that I emailed you about after the P&Z meeting, which was whether there would be any effects from this. I mean, it's essentially a manufacturing process next to a residential area, but if you wouldn't mind
Sure.
just sharing the answer you gave me.
Yep. So I did reach out to the property owner, and they felt that any smell emitting from for the use would be very low. Typically, what these would be is they would be all the brewing process would be all enclosed, so you don't really expect large pumping out of like a restaurant or something like that. The other one that I recall is the deliveries possibly affecting, because there is residential to the south. I thought they designed it well that the overhead door actually faces towards the west and not towards the residential, so the vehicle would actually unload and load in that location. With respect to the apartments to the south, there was a fair amount of distance to that property, but they also have a row of their garages and refuse areas that will act as a screen as well, also in the landscape buffering that they're putting along that property line.
Just note that there's several in the area that operate quite well without any issue, Back Pocket being one. And then the 2 Big Grove locations in Iowa City, one in Iowa City, one in Solon, both near residences. They, to my knowledge, haven't had any issues.
Any other questions for Russ?
Russ, is there any stormwater run into the pond, or where is that going
So
from
this
the
is
parking lot?
it goes to the Liberty Center pond. This was a master stormwater pond, so they have the benefit of that. So Kevin did review all the stormwater calcs, so that no on-site detention is required.
Okay, so no issue with the added intake that pond's going to take?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Great question. Anything further? Okay, thank you. Applicant presentation, anything new that you want to come up, talk about, enlighten us with?
My name's Rob Decker. I'm the engineering project manager for the project. The architect project manager is not here, but yeah, I can go through any concerns or questions you have or clarifications for anything. I'm very familiar with the project on the engineering side, all the sides really. But yeah, I don't have anything specific to go through with you, but I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Throw every hard possible question you can at Mr. Decker.
We don't know each other. Chris and I don't. So to Ryan's point, I know there has been past complaints with live music at Tin Roost. Is that with this open space, summer, outdoor feel with this? Are we going to have something similar with this being a little closer
Actually, I
to
might
residential?
take that. Actually, the way the building is actually oriented, the outdoor space goes towards the northeast. And so any kind of outdoor event, I think it's moving away from the direction of the building and not towards the residences.
East,
They
okay.
have talked a little bit about concert stuff. It's mostly inside in the discussions we've had. They actually have it well set up for inside. They haven't talked about anything outside specifically, but I would see that as probably potentially even maybe doing special permitting or something for, individual events. But I know that their plan is the majority of things are going to be on the inside, so.
In the orientation of the building, it's actually gonna be on the east side of the lot, and then kind of angling back towards the Tin Roost, and then some of it blocking out over the pond, so.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
And then
The
all be,
patio's kind of kind of sits on the north, kind of the north and kind of the east, kind of off that corner.
and it'll be accessible by the trail, and
Yep, it's got trail accessibility. We've talked a little bit about, we think it'll probably be isolated from the front. They kind of talked about that, which makes sense to kind of control flow through the building and then kind of out to the patio. But whether we do that through some sort of hard controls with some fencing or sort of a landscape design approach, we're still working through that.
Seemed to be an elevation change that was rather significant. I think that would help in that area too, wouldn't it, Rob?
It would, and I know Ryan and Nick, our engineers, our civil engineers worked on it. It went through that, and there's actually there's a new page in the plan that is the kind of nearly finalized plan that he put together to show that differentiation in grade up from the pond. Yeah, there's gonna have to be, the geometry of it, the way it kind of swings around, there's gonna be kind of it's not really a pinch point, but it starts to get a little bit narrower, and they like the idea of the proximity of that trail. Like I said, there's some fencing to delineate the outdoor areas, but there'll be a lot of hardscaping that goes on in that patio, as you can imagine, to do little set outs and cutouts for different groups to sit. And some of that is some hard, if you guys know what I mean by hardscaping, it's just pavers and different types of outcrop stone and things like that. But yes, there would be there's kind of it kind of almost splits the difference. So the trail kind of splits the difference from the pond up to the trail, and then the trail again has like a 5 or 6 foot rise up to the patio, but it's not like right next to it. But there would be an area where it does get kind of narrow, and there would be some terracing in there. I think we can use that as a. I was gonna grab the page while I was talking to you, but trying not to stare down. But that's on. Well, it's 111 of the PDF of your I know your packet's like 515 pages, but it's page 111, and it shows you kind of down at the bottom of the page what that differentiation in grade would look like. So
Russ, one thing I didn't hear, I guess when I watched P&Z, was any recommendations or conditions on those walls matching the stone that's in the pond area? Have we had that requirement for the other businesses when we're doing that shaping around the pond? Does that make sense that they match the stone ledging that we already have, or does it make sense for them to delineate and be different from the scaping of the pond area?
This is the one challenge I'll highlight that goes into my next discussion, but these getting down to these level of details for city council is often a challenge when they're still in the design. So what we've talked to Rob and Nick about is the actual physical design of that area is something we want to look at again prior to construction. We're concerned about that. Also how it drains right into the pond because we have those stones. So what we're going to do is, before we allow any construction out there, is get more of detailed, let this advance a little bit more, get another chance to review it. And it's so hard to get these level of details and then meet it on the council cycle. And so that's what we have agreed to do, is take a much closer look at that before construction.
That's great.
But I think this fits perfectly with the Liberty Center Pond vision, but those are important details that we want to get right.
The stone that you have around the pond it's called outcrop stone. It's from, usually around here, it's from like Weber Stone Quarry up in Stone City, Anamosa area. It looks really nice. It just comes straight out of the limestone shelf and it's kind of rough hewn at the edges, but it's flat for the stratification of the limestone. It looks really nice and the pond looks really nice. We actually talked about that. So I don't want to commit to them doing it, but I think we kind of do have that intent is to utilize some of those outcrop stones to kind of create terracing up to the patio. And then I think you probably have seen some more kind of squared off ones, which are a little more cut. People will tend to do those kind of up in patio areas because it kind of creates nice linear delineation. You can also sit on them. So kind of maybe that rougher look down by the trail to kind of terrace it up. And then the patio has the same type of stone, but a little more treated, if that makes sense. So that is kind of the general intent and thought process. Obviously, we'll get it all designed. A landscape architect will work on all of that and our civil team, so.
Great question. Anything else for Rob?
I think it's a really cool addition to the area.
It's a walking distance to a number of other things too. So.
Okay. Rob, thanks for your time here tonight.
You bet.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item C is resolution number 2022-05, a resolution approving the development site plan for Lot 7 and Lot 8 of Liberty Center, Part 1, North Liberty, Iowa. Could I have a motion for that resolution, please?
I'll move that, Mayor. Go ahead, Eric. I'll second.
Been moved and seconded. Any more discussion? Any other questions? All right. Tracy, can we have roll call, please?
Stiddig,
Aye.
Smith,
Aye.
Wason,
Aye.
Harrington.
Aye.
It's been moved. Proceed. Thanks again, Rob. Item 12 is the Taco Bell restaurant site plan. Again, item A is Staff and Planning Commission recommendations, Russ.
This is a little over a 2,200 square foot Taco Bell with a drive-through. High degree of masonry on here with some accent panels, outdoor seating area as well as pedestrian connections to both public sidewalks. Planning Commission did recommend approval of this, and staff does as well.
Is there an applicant presentation? Outstanding.
Angie Morgan with JLMV Architecture on the civil engineer on the project.
Awesome. Thank you for coming, Angie.
No problem.
Are there any questions that we have for Angie while she's here?
Angie looks small, so I'm guessing mostly drive-through.
Correct.
Okay.
That's 60% to 70% of the business revenue is expected to be drive-through.
And then I'm sure, Rustin, that there was the conversation about overflow and where it might go.
Yeah, there's actually, they show on their plan kind of a stacking, so it's actually has 2 lanes that kind of funnel into one, so I think they'll be
good.
Yeah, I think they'll be good.
The only issue, and it's hard to see it's hard to tell in the renderings, and of course it'll meet code, but the sign that's out by the sidewalk, you've got a crosswalk there, so you've got cars coming out of that drive-through lane with a sign immediately to the right that may obstruct view of bikers, children walking. Is that something we need to make sure is far enough back to give enough view of that space?
Yeah, that's a good comment. It's something we noticed. So we'll take a little bit closer look at that and it's hard to tell the scale and actual size of this, but we'll take a closer look at that when we get those renderings. And it might be that the sign needs to get moved a little bit to the east or something like that. But they've been really good to work with through this whole process, so we don't have any concerns.
Angie, I watched the P&Z meeting, and I feel like I need to step back and do what Councilor Pollack might have asked us in the past. Do we have bike racks, bike parking on this site? There's not as much detail on the site plan that we have here.
Don't having it in front of me, I don't recall them being on there. But I'm sure it's not, we do it multiple Taco Bells across the country, and it's not uncommon for that to be required.
Right.
So we
And
can
it's not a big
easily-
expensive ask at this point in time to put
We
those
can
in there.
easily fit those in.
Awesome. That would be great.
And we don't know at this point what the other half of the lot will be used for.
We do not, yeah. I imagine at some point the owner is going to want to replat and potentially develop that.
Okay.
Any more questions? Okay. Thanks for your time. Thanks for sitting through the budget conversation.
Thank you.
By the way.
Thanks.
Item C is the resolution number 2022-06, a resolution approving the development site plan for Lot 3 Liberty Center, Part 1, North Liberty, Iowa. Could I have a motion for that resolution, please?
So move.
Second.
It's been moved and it's been seconded. Are there any other questions or discussion for the group? All right, hearing none. Tracy, can we have a roll call, please?
Harrington,
Aye.
Smith,
Aye.
Wason,
Aye.
Sittig.
Aye.
It's been approved. Thank you very much. Again, thanks for your time coming in here. Item 13 is the Watts rezoning. Item A is staff and planning commission's recommendations.
So this is a part that's zoned for single-family residential. And they did come in and ask if zero lot line single-family or kind of the zero lot line development would be compatible with this area. They indicated that that product is more affordable than a standalone single-family residence, and therefore are being able to sell those a little bit better. We do have RD10 zone property directly to the west, so staff agreed that it would be compatible. We did have a good neighbor meeting. No one outside of staff and the applicant attended. And the Planning Commission in December did recommend approval of the request. Staff does as well.
Thank you. Any questions for Russ over here? Okay. Item B, any applicant presentation? All right, we are 3 for 3 for applicant presentations tonight.
John Marner with MMS Consultants representing the applicant. I don't have anything else to add. Russ did a great job. I would add there's RD10 zoning to the south of this property as well. It's taking, I believe, there were 12 single-family lots, and it's going to 10 duplex lots, 0 lots. I'm available for questions if you have any.
That was my question. Any questions for John?
How many overall units in this section?
It would go from the 12 single-family to 20 total units when you take the 10 0 lots and 2 units on each lot.
Do you know what the difference between the targeted price points would be between this and the single family?
I don't have that information. I know the single-family lots, I believe the single-family lots were 80 foot in width. Not sure if you have the plat in front of
That's
you,
correct.
Russ.
It would be, yeah, and then there'll be 240s.
I believe they were 80 foot in width, so they were larger, a little bit on the larger side compared to the 0 lots. I believe these are 90 foot 0 lot width, so they would be 45 foot frontage on each one of the 0 lots. The corner lots are a little bit smaller, just because they're corner lots, so they're smaller from the standpoint of the total overall building envelope, but the lot size itself is actually larger.
Just looking at the real estate, I mean, the 0 lot lines in that area tend to go for the lower 300s, maybe the 325 around there, and it's been difficult to see a site-built single-family home for under $500,000 in town, and it's terrifying.
It's scary to say that that's affordable across.
And I always have to say it's more affordable because
Yeah.
you're absolutely right. But I think we are seeing there is a larger segment of the population that can afford that as opposed to, being able to afford a $500,000 house.
Yeah.
Any other questions for John? Okay, John, thanks for your time and also sitting through this budget.
Thank you.
Item C is public hearing regarding proposed amendment of the zoning map. This is an opportunity for anyone in the public. Andrew, you want to give any shots at this one? You care about it at all?
I'm sorry, I was.
That's okay.
Not paying attention.
You're the only ones left for public, so I just had to pick.
Okay.
I'm sure they're here for the zoning.
I'm more or less just here to see how things are going at this point. And we've never been to a meeting, so we're just kind of seeing how things work and checking it out. So
Awesome. You picked a doozy.
yeah, I'm really excited.
Perfect. All right, I will close the public hearing then, if that's all right with everybody. Item D then is first consideration of ordinance number 2022-01, an ordinance amending chapter 167 of the North Liberty Code of Ordinances by amending the use regulations on property located on the south side of Dennison Avenue, approximately 130 feet east of Brook Ridge Avenue, located in North Liberty, to those set forth in the municipal code for the RD10 two-unit residence district. Could I have a motion for this?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any other questions or comments? All right, Tracy, roll call, please.
Harrington,
Aye.
Wason,
Aye.
Sittig,
Aye.
Smith.
Awesome, motion passes. Thank you again, John. All right, Russ has already assumed his role at the podium up there. We're gonna move on to item 14, which is zoning code, just a thin little part of our packet here tonight. Item A is Staff and Planning Commission recommendations.
So thank you. I use the joke at Planning Commission. I can't use it. We'll just, go through this page by page. Obviously, we can't do that. But this is, something I've been working on and for about 2 years, and something I kind of had conceptualized when I was fortunate enough to take on this role. And it's taken a while. The last 10% was probably the toughest, as Grant would agree. And Grant really went to ride with me on this, so I appreciate all the help. I'm going to try and go through some general themes about what I was trying to accomplish with this ordinance. Really just trying to make it more user-friendly, kind of foster that we want to do business in North Liberty type. Modernize the code, kind of align it with best practices, and not give everything away, right? We want to protect and enhance the built environment. That is, we've done such a great job at that. We need to keep with that. Really kind of started with this use table, uses defined and use standards. Much more user friendly to open up a table, see if my use is listed. Right now, the way the code, you go to every single zoning classification and it lists all of those uses. It's easy for uses to get named different things in different parts of the code because it's difficult to go back and amend every single use table in the district. So also what we did was, we adapted to new uses, right? Microbrewery isn't technically listed in the code. It will be now. Another one that caught us is these micro-fulfillment centers. I'm sure we all use e-commerce, but what we did see was the family video turning into essentially what becomes a micro-fulfillment center where you go online, order, and it's delivered. I'm not saying that that's a bad thing because, we use it, but it could change the retail landscape of a city, and it's something we should think about, something we should talk about. So we listed that as a use. Ensuring that certain uses are where they should be. Right now, truck stops are listed as a permitted use in C2A. I don't know that we would want something like that along Penn Street corridor. And we've kind of had to tell people, well, that's not our vision for the area, but the prudent thing to do is why don't we just fix the code? So we did do that. Made sure I put the uses in the proper location. The one I've got highlighted is a greenhouse. Love greenhouses and nurseries, but they tend to be messy. They have a lot of outdoor areas, so they're more appropriate in industrial type areas. This was a fun one, antiquated nomenclature, boot and shoe cut stock findings, taverns, howitzer manufacturers, a couple of fun uses. So we're getting rid of all of that. When possible, we kind of group a bunch of uses into one category, and I have personal service establishment here, and it's a whole bunch of uses instead of individually listing all of those uses, and that's how your code gets antiquated, because that use, was in fashion 40 years ago, but it's not anymore. So it allows us to adapt to new uses that come along. Some confusing and inconsistent standards. We define automotive repair major and minor, but they're not listed anywhere else in the code. C2A lists auto repair shop and auto service. I1 lists auto body, so I've got to kind of start making some interpretations of what I think it means. There's actually a section in the code that allows new franchise dealerships to perform major and minor automotive repair if they're selling vehicles, even though the code says you can't do that. And so we try to really go in and fix these little problems. Site plan approval, I just mentioned it. Right now, we're essentially requiring a full site plan, which, depending on the level of the project, could be upwards of spending $40,000 to $50,000 to have city council potentially, that doesn't happen a lot, to say, no, that's a lot of risk for somebody to take on. Usually for a development, you don't have a development loan until you've got all of your entitlements in place. So you're just spending, money that's in the business account. What we want to do is separate it into preliminary site plan approval. You would review the same things that we just showed you on the site plans, basically a general configuration of the property. And then we would do construction plan approval that would be reviewed by city staff. That's typically more of the process. Some communities don't even have city council or planning commission review it. We'd still want you guys to have input on that. But when you start getting into the details of stormwater calculations and there's these back and forth iterations, that's more appropriate at the staff level. And so again, you're still going to be reviewing everything you pretty much review. It's just the details. And when we review the construction site plan, we're ensuring consistency with what was approved by you. Revised off-street parking standards. So when you update all of the uses, I've got to update the parking standards to align with the uses. And there was a lot of fixes also in the parking standard table. Currently, there's only 21 uses in the parking table. Now there's 68 because, again, they align with the new uses that we did. I will say that our code, and I've stated this before, we require too much parking. And our role as government is not to figure out exactly how much parking you need. It's to have the minimum amount that's going to prevent congestion on public streets. That's really what we're trying to protect. Business owners like the Field Day Brewery, they're providing way more parking than what the code would require because they know that that's their business model and it's not going to be a good business for them that people can't find a place to park. So we are reducing them in some instances. So I know it's easy to say, well, let's look at what other communities are doing. Coralville has very antiquated off-street parking, so it doesn't really make sense to compare. Davenport and Cedar Rapids were the ones that were the most two recent that rewrote their zoning code. So what I did is looked at our regulations compared to those two communities, and I thought Davenport was not very restrictive at all, and I thought Cedar Rapids was pretty restrictive. So I kind of tried to fall somewhere in the middle of being reasonable. This is an example of what I think is excessive parking. This is over at Penn Street, where the Little Caesars was. I don't know what time of day this was, but I've never seen that parking lot full. And the minimum number of parking spaces, because we required this many parking spaces. And they're struggling right now with the pandemic right now. Here's an example. It's over by the new condominium being built on Community Drive. This satellite parking lot was constructed because there was a prospective tenant that was going to be a restaurant. And because that parking ratio is much larger, we had them construct this additional parking area. The tenant never came, and this parking area rarely got used, if ever. I think people park there probably walk around the pond. The other issue that we have is right now the way the code, it differentiates between office, retail, and restaurant. And then your parking calculations are based on all of those things. So there's the potential for a tenant to come in and for me to analyze the entire parking and say, wait a minute, per code you don't have enough parking, so you can't have that tenant there. And I don't think that's very business friendly at all. So when you have a multi-tenant business complex like this, we just have it straight rate. It's one space per 350 square feet, understanding that some of it's going to be restaurants with higher uses, some of it's going to be retail with lower uses and office, and they mix together and it works out just fine. So that is in the proposal. Again, keeping on with the diagrams, inserting into the code about what we mean with things. So that pretty much covers parking. I understand there was the way the state had restricted the city's government to regulate uses based on families. And there was some rental uses inserted in the zoning ordinance, and I disagree with that. I don't disagree that rental housing should be regulated. It shouldn't be in the zoning, right? You're either a single family dwelling or it's not a single family dwelling that's a rental or owner occupied. It's a single family dwelling. That's the use. And so what we're doing is taking the relevant language and moving it over to the housing code, which is what other communities typically do. Tom Palmer regulates that, so I reached out to Tom and said, this is what we'd like to do, and Tom saw no issue with that. We didn't get an opportunity to really look into the rental housing code as written. I kind of had to stop somewhere, but that's something we can look at further on to make sure our regulations are aligning with best practice. This was an interesting one to me. We have a floodplain overlaid district. It was adopted in 2006, and it's actually listed as a zoning classification, which means it should be mapped on our zoning map, and it's not. We already have floodplain development permit regulations, and it didn't quite supplant it. It was almost like another regulatory process that you had to go through. I'm proposing just to strike this and follow the floodplain development ordinance. Here's a map. The light blue is the special flood zone area. We don't have a lot of flood zones in the city of North Liberty, so there's really not a need to overregulate on this process here. And so we're trying to scale back the regulation. I'd rather put my energy into the floodplain development permit process, which will remain in the code. Some other subtle design standards. So I put things back where they should be, like design standards pertaining to landscaping. I put it in the landscape code. Design standards pertaining to signs, I put it in the sign code. Site lighting was in performance standards. I made it its own section. Here's something that we don't regulate necessarily how big you can have a garage, but this isn't in our community. But you can see here how the garage, a 3-star garage, absolutely dominates the front facade here. And so while you don't necessarily want to, from my perspective, regulate the size of a garage, what you want to do is limit its scale as it relates to the overall structure when you view it from the street. So that's a small design standard. No matter how small your lot is, you could have a 2-stall garage. It's where you start getting bigger than that, then you're going to get into that limitation. And I think we probably would have seen something like this. I know we haven't seen an RS9. I think we are going to see an RS9 application, but I think you would see something like that come forward because everybody wants a 3-car garage. Landscape ordinance was rewritten, and I just highlight this because this is allowable in our code. This is an end of a parking stall. They should end in landscape islands, and so I wrote in the code that every stall has to end in a landscape island. This is the site plan that's perfectly permitted by code, but they just paint the end of it and put stripes on it, and that's not the community standard that I think we've done a good job in this community. We just need to articulate exactly what we want people to do and just say, well, you can't do that because the code doesn't allow you to do that. So currently in the sign regulations, there's a provision that says ground signs are preferred. Pole signs are allowed if approved by city council. It's my opinion that we should just say, we're not going to do pole signs. What I've done is done diagrams for what, I hope, caught my joke here, by the way. This is a Back to the Future reference for all 3 of these. But define what a ground sign is. And these are from real examples in the city that, you kind of go around and you say, yeah, that looks nice. Or you see a sign that has, the sign cabinet in a very skinny base. That tends not to look very nice. And so I've specified minimal dimensions, and the sign community this isn't a terribly onerous thing to do. I just think we've moved past a community of from a design perspective of allowing pole signs. If anything is allowed, we actually have a decent non-conforming code with respect to pole signs. And any sign that's non-conforming allows you to make adjustments to it as long as you don't increase the non-conformity. So I'm not concerned if a sign becomes non-conforming that we say you can't touch it or do anything with it. That's not how the code's written. It's actually written pretty well. Also proposing some zoning district changes, deleting the RM4, no one is going to develop multifamily at 4 units to the acre. We don't have one property in the city that's zoned RM4. We have one parcel that's zoned RM6, that's on Jarrow Way. I'm proposing just to delete RM4 and RM6 and have the lowest one at an RM8. RM8 starts to make sense from a multifamily standpoint. The C3 district being repurposed to something that's called a higher intensity commercial district. The current one that we have, there's 4 parcels in the city, and it was called a concept commercial, had a very limited number of uses. Allows for retail on the bottom and residential. There's 2 buildings right now over on Kansas, and the bottom floors are completely empty. The residentials are fully leased. When I say C3, more of kind of your big box, heavy retail, like a Costco. We don't have those things yet. Don't know if we will, but we're preparing for those things, and maybe those uses are more appropriate adjacent to the interstate. This kind of where I envision those being. Grouping of what I call special purpose districts, and these are all those little things hanging out there that I got to put into kind of a group. ID, interim development, we already have that. Public use, we have that. And then our overlay districts, planned area development. And then we also have a professional office zoning classification. We rezoned a parcel there at Penn and Dubuque, but it was a standalone zoning district, and it didn't have any underlying bulk requirements like setbacks or things like that. I think it was meant to be an overlay district, so I'm just kind of fixing that and making it so the property that I referred to would be zoned single family, and this would be an overlay on it. Also creating a new designation called industrial park. This is a new classification, but allows for more flexibility. Essentially, the uses are, they could be like light manufacturing, but they're conducted indoors, so it doesn't have that impact use. And this isn't something we would see in a residential neighborhood. You'd see it more over toward the interstate. I use there will be OPEs, right? I'm going to look at the code going through this and go, "Oh, I missed something." I do not fully anticipate that this will be perfect. We're going to find little errors and little typos and things like that, and I'll come back and fix them, right? I'm committed to doing that. I'm committed to rewriting the whole zoning code and tackle a lot of the city code. So there's going to be things that we find, and we need to come back to you for. So sorry for the long-winded presentation.
It was much more enjoyable than I anticipated it being. So I appreciate the Back to the Future references.
I
too,
enjoyed it.
as an aside. I'll just say that I talked to you a couple of weeks ago at City Hall, and this is something that got you out of bed every day to come to work, and you're terribly excited about this. So
Sounds so awful to say.
I'm glad you are. With that, do you guys have any questions, or having gone through the document that Russ sent to us ahead of time that you want to press them on? Did you find any OPEs in there, for example?
Mayor, I would just comment. Can you go back to your first slide?
This one? Or you?
We want to do business in North Liberty. That was one of the reasons why I got off my couch and ran to be up here. Was hearing just some stories that it was at times difficult to do business here. And you are fixing some of those issues. I'm very appreciative, and we should be shouting that from the rooftops, because North Liberty is open for business. We want your business, and we're willing to shake your hand in a partnership to come be part of our community. And this is the basis for that, and I couldn't be more thrilled about it. So thank you.
Thank you, Counselor.
And I just want to add, like, that was not painful to listen or, see how you took the time to align things to where they needed to be, because like you said, it was confusing. And when people ask you, it's like, but this says this, and then I have to go search and find this, and no one really had an answer because they were all over the place. So for you to take the time out and enjoyably tackle that, is very much appreciated, and I think it will help people navigate and also make you all's job a lot easier as well, because now it all align. Well, it's starting to align, and even with the oops, it still makes a lot more sense for me. And this is not a strong area for me of understanding the codes myself, but you just kind of made it very accessible and and reader friendly for someone that will be intimidated to come and ask for that information. So thank you.
Thank you, Counselor.
How many pages did you save, do you think?
I think the clean version was over 100. But because we, from a reorganizational standpoint, it I can't remember what the number was, but we actually reduced the number of pages from the zoning code because we're becoming a lot more efficient. It was at least 30.
But that's part of that partnership that businesses can feel comfortable with, is that we've done that reduction, we've taken the time, and we have the knowledge on staff and the willingness to answer the questions and help businesses be successful when they come here. And that's the biggest part of it.
And I tell you, the one thing that I appreciate most about my job is that first conversation you have with the developer of, and they kind of look at you like, what do you think? And it's, you could make or break a project with that meeting right there. And I have a great deal of respect for that role of saying, if it's a truck stop, maybe that's a little tough one to get behind, but is it something that we can work together and bring to North Liberty? And that's where I try to get to.
And it makes projects a little more consistent in how we want North Liberty to look and be presented as. So it is very helpful.
Yeah, and it was, I go on all day about this, but some things that I didn't get to, and bike racks are one of them. It's I fully intend to have bicycle parking regulations in the off-street parking section. It was just one of those things where I had to say, okay, I gotta move forward with this, but I fully intend to do that, to have those standards of what, not just throwing a bike rack out there. There are actually standards for spacing and location and things like that. That's something I fully intend to bring forward.
Thank you for taking all your time, and Grant too. I'm sure you put in some time on this too, so appreciate both of your work.
Yeah, and again, Grant is, I'm surprised he didn't, get out of here. I don't want to talk about this anymore, but to be honest, I needed a sounding board. I needed a sounding board with this stuff. Does this make sense? Where does it conflict? And Grant just, it would be very easy for somebody to say, this is the planning thing, but Grant gave me 100% of it.
If I may, I'll say that this is 95 or more percent, Mr. Rusnak. This represents a stupendous amount of work on his part, and has been very easy to work with, and very knowledgeable, and understands the legal requirements that we have with this, and is I'm comfortable with going through what he's written and saying, yep, this makes sense. When we have questions, we worked it out. This is not the end, as he was saying. This is part of the overall. I think this is the biggest bite that we have planned for the zoning code, but this one is big by necessity because it involves reviewing all the districts and all the underlying things. So from this we can start taking more frequent but smaller bites out of the remainder of the code until we get it to as modern as he wants it to be. So it will not be perfect for a while, but we are more perfect with every iteration, I think. And so I'm very appreciative for all he's done.
I like to speak in analogies sometimes, and I think, Russ, you started this off by saying that he went along with you on this ride. So I just picture you guys on a cross-country road trip, which leads me to the other question that I asked you, is how far across the country do you feel like you are in this process, to further that analogy? And you told me, how far did you get from the West Coast to the East Coast?
We're in Vegas.
We're in Vegas. It's a long way to go. Vegas is a good place to stop, but and I see why you pulled over for the night.
Yeah, and we look at it from the the entire city code, and Grant and I have just, as nerdy as this sounds as well, you know, kind of taking these bites at the city code to bring it to where we want. So yeah, we're in Vegas right now. We got a ways to go.
All right, that's a great quote. Thanks again, Russ.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, item B is public hearing regarding proposed amendments to the zoning code. Anything, Andrew? John? I'm.
Gotta make it official.
I'll make it official.
On from the development side, working with the developers, this is very good. The procedural stuff in particular is a big deal. He stressed it. The ability to not get quite so much into the weeds up front for the developers and not put quite so much cost risk forward early in the process. Get to a point where they're comfortable with being able to move forward, knowing that you can have council and P&Z approval, still being able to work with staff, with engineering and staff to make sure that we're following the code and everything else, that everything needs to happen is happening. That's a big deal. The parking ordinances, a lot of the things in there that he presented are very beneficial. So great job.
I'm glad you stuck around, John. Thank you. Andrew, anything that you want to add?
No, we're good, thank you.
Okay, you got it. You got it. I'll close the public hearing then. Item C is first consideration of ordinance number 2022-02, an ordinance amending chapters 165 through 170 and 173 of the North Liberty Code of Ordinances, governing the administration, organization, enforcement, and definitions of zoning districts, development, and sign regulations, or other words, we're to Vegas so far. Could I have a motion for this, please?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any other questions or comments from council? All right, hearing none. Tracy, could we have roll call, please?
Sittig,
Aye.
Smith,
Aye.
Wason,
Aye.
Harrington.
Aye.
It has been moved. That was enjoyable, Russ. Can you keep it going for us?
Thank you.
Let's move on to item 15, which is rental code.
So the next series, and I've got some slides I can show you, but these next are companion requests to this big effort. And so again, this is just relocating regulations that were in the zoning ordinance to the proper place, which should be the housing code.
All right. Our public left. So I will open public hearing regarding proposed amendments to the rental code, and I will hear none. I'll close public hearing. Item C then is first consideration of ordinance number 2022-03, an ordinance amending chapters 146 of the North Liberty Code of Ordinances governing rental housing procedures and regulations and structure procedure requirements. Could I have a motion for this consideration, please?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Do you guys have any questions for Russ on this item? Okay. Tracy, roll call, please.
Harrington,
Aye.
Sittig,
Aye.
Smith.
Aye.
Wason.
Aye.
Motion carries. Item 16, comprehensive plan land use map amendment.
So we're asking for this amendment in order to make the subsequent rezoning consistent with the future land use map. Originally, I thought that, you know, might be appropriate to have the UIHC property zone C3, which is our higher intensity commercial use. When I reached out to their representative to discuss that, they said, you know, we have no objection to that. However, we are a public entity, and we agreed with them and thought, yeah, this should be zoned public use, and the land use would be appropriate, would be public to be consistent with that. So the Planning Commission did recommend approval of the request as public on the future land use map. Staff does as well.
All right. Item B is resolution number 2022-07, a resolution approving the comprehensive plan land use map amendment. Could I have a motion for this resolution, please?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Do you guys have questions on this item for Russ? Hearing none. Tracy, could I have roll call, please?
Sittig,
Aye.
Harrington,
Aye.
Wason,
Aye.
Smith.
Aye.
Motion carries. Item 17, city rezonings.
Okay, so these are the companion rezonings. This is the UIHC property. Recommending this go to the public use district. This is the only RM6 property in the city currently. Since that's going away, we are recommending that this be zoned RM8. This was the RSO district that I referred to. This would go to RS4 with an overlay of the professional office district. And then the last one is Liberty Executive Park. These are the only 4 parcels that are currently zoned C3 in the city. That's being reimagined to a different use. Also C3, but listed as a higher intensity commercial uses with a lot of additional uses. And so when I reached out to the property owner, he was one of the first people I actually met with of, I'm really struggling down here with these lots. Is there something we could do to work together? And it took a while, but this is what we ultimately came up with. We are asking that there be a restriction of 4 uses that are allowable in the C3 district. And the reason for that is Ryan and I had discussed that they wouldn't, although I don't know that the market really supports those uses being there, like heavy retail, vehicle dealership, and storage facilities, it didn't fit into that overall vision of that development. So the uses I mentioned, like heavy retail, probably be more appropriate towards the interstate and things like that. I did reach out to the property owner, as I mentioned, and said, this is what we're moving forward with these 4 uses excluded. And he said, thank you very much, Ryan. We appreciate your help.
Okay. Item B is public hearing regarding proposed rezonings. Seeing no public, I'll close the public hearing. And item C is first consideration of ordinance number 2022-04, an ordinance amending zoning on various properties in the city of North Liberty, Iowa. Do you need a motion for this, please?
So move.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Do you guys have any questions about any of the proposed zoning changes?
So Russ, the overlay corner, wasn't that request kind of somewhat a one-off where it was an older home, he wanted to remodel, use it as a business, we approved, he's now since done an addition, that property looks, in my opinion, looks better than when it started, but I guess I don't, why is this necessary there?
So we're essentially not changing any. So what was approved and what is existing is virtually the same. It's just called something different. This was actually, the RSO was a standalone zoning district. And when you have a standalone zoning district, it's supposed to have its own standards for like maximum height, what your setbacks are. It didn't have any of those. And so it was the strangest thing, as I think it was meant to be an overlay district, but somehow it got written as, so I really just look at it as fixing the problem. The one thing I did insert in there is I don't think the location of this would be appropriate, like in the middle of a neighborhood. So what I did is put locational criteria that it's got to be located on an arterial road or the intersection of at least 2 collectors. That places those types of uses on heavier traffic. So right here, Penn Street's an arterial road, Dubuque Street's a minimum of a collector. So that seems to be a little bit more appropriate than, say, in the middle of a neighborhood.
Okay.
That's a good question, Brent.
The executive park area out west, so generally our goal is still to get more business type things like Geico and the credit union, and generally speaking.
Yes, absolutely.
And excluding, the expansion of like a car dealer in it. So our goal is still to continue like we've done because, when that was done a long time ago, that was the intent was to be a more higher end executive type park and stuff. So as long as we're somewhat similar to that still.
And the C3 district allows for larger buildings, similar to what the Green State zoning is. We'll still have that higher level of masonry. I think where this one became a problem is requiring retail and residential above and kind of, it was actually called in our code residential above commercial. And again, both of those storefronts are completely vacant. And I don't think the market supports that type of commercial development in there. It may. Now what we do is we call them mixed use buildings and allow for non-residential buildings. Maybe it's an art gallery, maybe it just doesn't have to be retail, those types of things. And hopefully allowing a little bit more flexibility that the owner can, get some development on the rest of those properties.
Ryan, is this something that gets communicated to our economic development partners when we do something like this so that they're aware?
Yeah, they'll be in the know. I mean, we get, digress too much, but we get requests from them weekly on or maybe every other week on different companies looking for things so that, then we point them to where we want them, where we think, okay, it makes sense for them to go here, or they can't go here because of, so yeah, we'll communicate with them.
So Russ, I think I heard you say that this will help that existing building that is commercial on the bottom, residential on top, allow them the opportunity for other uses in that space right there.
I hope so. Yeah, by
Okay.
code it does.
Okay.
But hopefully they can find a tenant to occupy that space. That would be
Gotcha.
wonderful. But certainly we're offering the tools for that to happen.
Gotcha. Great. You guys have any other questions? Any other spots?
I don't have any question, but I know over in that area it's kind of tricky for businesses in general. Like, I think a lot of businesses over there kind of struggle with just, people visiting and stopping by unless they actually know it's over there. So hopefully it does open up and change that a lot.
Yeah, that whole kind of West Penn over by the interstate is pretty tricky.
Yeah.
I know it's apparent that the demand for commercial development tends to be along Penn Street, Ranch Hall Way. I see Forever Green now, that the UIHC, but they tend to stick to those main corridors. But even with that said, the west side gets, those restaurants have had a tough go at it. But this is even, mid-block away from those. So I think it's a really tough place to have like a retail shop. It's more of that larger destination use office spaces work there and things like that. And again, now with the pandemic, that kind of rethinks what office office development's going to be in the future. And we just got to wait for all this dust to clear.
Okay. That was just the staff and planning segment of that item, correct?
Yes.
Okay,
Planning
thank you.
Commission did recommend approval unanimously.
Okay. Close the public hearing. Item C then is first consideration.
We have
I'm
a
sorry.
motion on the
Tracy, roll call, please. Thank you.
Gotcha. Smith,
Aye.
Harrington,
Aye.
Wason,
Aye.
Sittig.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you all for guiding me through that. Item 18 is discussion on our council vacancy. And I don't know, we were just here 2 weeks ago talking about this. You've all had an opportunity to do your own thinking research, do a lot of research. I don't think anybody over here has anything specific to bring up or new information to guide us in this. Or there is a new twist that we did learn early this afternoon.
Yes, so if council wants to proceed with a special election, the date for said election, the earliest they could do that would be March 15th. I think everything else is unchanged from what was in your packet. That's due to there being a bond election for Clear Creek Amendment School District. That election takes place on March 1st, which would otherwise be the next available date for us. They canvass that a week later, and so then we would be able to, on March 15th, that result would then be canvassed on the 22nd.
Thank you. And that's that's an important guidepost for us as you all have on your calendar right now. Wednesday, March 23rd is set to be our discussion as a group to do our 2-year planning. And I need to have a full council for that. We can't go into that with just 4 of us. So I'm hoping that we can get that pulled off. Having a date of March 15th, if we go the direction of special election, gives us that certainty, even after the canvassing, that we'll have a full council on March 23rd. I'll stop beating that point, though.
So we're not allowed to combine a special election with the CCA
It's not up to us. The county auditor determines when the election is practical on their end. They don't have the staff resources to do 2 elections at the same time per them, and that is the end of that line.
Sure.
We made an appeal to have, it was gonna be actually a week later, and there was an appeal made that, to bring it up as early as we possibly could, and this is what we got, was the 15th. And that's how the state law reads, and that's, I think we're all in agreement on how the process has to work.
Well, I appreciate the mayor's leadership on that, because I agree 100%, Mayor. You know, having that person for that meeting, I agree 100%. So thanks for pushing that.
Welcome.
I also want to just point out that that is the week of spring break, which also may impact voter turnout and so forth. So that is something that we may want to consider when having this discussion and making our decision.
We can't have it any sooner than that, though,
Yeah.
based on the calendar.
Yeah.
Anytime in February is getting to be off limits
Yeah.
for us. Early voting.
Moreover, you probably, if I can
Yep, please do.
interject, you probably can't have it much later than that either. The election needs to be held as soon as is practicable.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
By state law. So we ask them, they say, and we kind of have to go along with it to that extent. Unless you don't make a decision, and then it eventually gets made for you. And that would get held, I think, in April, probably.
That'll be in April sometime.
Yeah. That would be the only way to delay that would be to have the decision delayed further.
Okay.
But then you miss your,
Was there an update on the cost of a
$5,000, one one voting center is what they call it. It would be at the community center. Interestingly, if we did have an election using the new precincts, they would still use the old precincts because it hasn't been that hadn't taken effect yet. So, one voting center, community center, $5,000.
So I guess I'll just get us warmed up here. As someone that's seen some appointments attempted, that they've oftentimes not been successful and left in our own accord as a council. It seems that we may have the idea that it's well within our powers, and it certainly is, to make an appointment, but it takes a simple petition to just alter the course of whatever time and energies we've put into that. So even bringing a couple of members of the city that want to be on our council, having them sit through an appointment process, hearing them, they develop their time and ideas, and we make a decision. All of that could be for naught, just by the simple signing of a petition saying that we don't want there to be to be an appointment. So in some ways, these things are within our control, but that one measure is there that can just simply make that decision on our behalf. And that's happened twice in just the last few years. So in my experience, the general public prefers to have a special election, to have that voice in there. And while the expense, Eric, to your point, has been a thought of mine, overall, the election allows for the voters to make that decision, and it's a process by which it cannot be overridden. So if we have it in the schedule, we know when it's going to happen, we know what it's going to be an outcome, and it's final, then we also know that we can plan for everything else beyond that. So an appointment may just delay that process, or it may go on without a petition being dropped. So I know I don't get to say in this. This is tough sometimes for me, but I would recommend that we make this a special election just to provide that certainty.
Can I ask
Yes, Brian?
Grant a question? So if we say we wanted to appoint somebody and they said, we're going to appoint somebody at the next meeting in February.
Yep.
And then somebody has a petition because they have 2 weeks to do that.
That's right.
And then does that change the timing of when you'd had an election?
Yes.
All right.
It would be in April by that point.
All right.
And,
So,
and it would still cost you $5,000, right?
so the most assured way of getting our goal of getting some the fifth person back on the council is actually to have an election so that we actually, our timetable then would be set.
Assuming you have at least one vote, and one write-in vote will do the trick.
Yep.
So yeah.
No, I'm sure that'll be okay. So, well, I've been in an appointment meeting that was somewhat difficult because there was no agreement amongst the council, and it was quite uncomfortable to be the person who had to just keep going down the list back and forth. And before somebody kind of stepped up and took some leadership and just said, hey, we just got to get going. So,
And the outcome was the same after the special election.
Yep.
As was made that night at that meeting.
so I would suggest that we move ahead with getting the election.
So, a couple of things. I had to reach out and ask some questions today, knowing that there's only 4 of us and not 5. Making an assumption, a wrong assumption at the time, that if we vote tonight and we are a tie, the mayor doesn't vote, so there's no tiebreaker. So, and Grant, please correct me if I'm not correct. But if it's a tie vote tonight, that is a non-decision, and then the decision goes to the auditor, which would push the special election to their choosing, which I'm guessing now, in that particular case, would be April.
We still have our 60 days to decide, though, right?
Sure do.
If there was a motion tonight for something and it didn't pass, we could come back and revisit that at a later meeting.
Yes, you would have the full 60 days, and you could even have a special meeting and reconvene if you want, and meet as many times as you need to. Don't recommend that, but you can. There are other options available to you than just waiting every 2 weeks, and so I'm here to answer any questions that I reasonably can. I'll do my best. I went to law school, not Hogwarts, so I'll try.
So my lead to that was, for me personally, when the cost change occurred and the auditor agreed that it would be a reduction in cost, I was personally much more in favor of special election, having been on both sides, been appointed and gone through the election. After a small poll and small representation on my council page, most people were in favor that had input of an appointment. So I reached out some more to the neighborhood ambassador group to ask for input, and all but one, and again, we're not talking hundreds of people here, okay? It's a small sample size, but all but one that replied out of that group also wanted to see an appointment. And so I really sit torn, but you know, asking for that input, getting that input, and having it be a very high majority of the favor of appointment, I think that's the way that I'm leading tonight.
I will chime in and say the individuals that I talked to as well in regards to having a special election, knowing we just recently went through a special election. Same thing, just the amount of interest and turnout for that. They also suggested an appointment as well. My hesitation with that is because there's not a clear process of what that looks like in terms of how council has proceeded with that. That's my only, hesitation with that, and knowing that at any point somebody could petition for it. I do know the signatures are a lot more than they have been. So that kind of lessens the chance of someone petitioning. I'm not saying that they won't, but in listening to people again talk about just the lack of interest that was shown in this past election cycle, um, it was obvious to say, well, why would we go through that all over again when the folks that were interested obviously went forth with it the last time. So right now I'm leaning more toward appointing someone. I don't know what that process looks like. And I too have gone back and forth over a special election and appointing, but just in response from the folks that I have talked to and my own personal initial feelings, it was leaning more towards appointment. And I also know that in terms of time frame for us to be able to get someone in and be able to prepare for our planning session is very important. And I would rather us be able to go through that process and appoint someone if possible and get that started than to prolong the process. So that's my answer.
But if we really for sure want to have an election or appoint somebody that would then make sure you had somebody that was going to be on the council on the 23rd of March, the election is the more secure way to do that. And we've actually had a couple springtime special elections where a lot of people ran. I mean, there was more than a handful, I think, for both times. For some reason, the off-year election in North Liberty
Has
it
a
does-
lower
a very turnout.
turnout.
So I've seen Swisher and Ely, and they have a higher voter turnout than we do, and sometimes almost in round numbers. But in the spring, we've seemed to done pretty good with that. The other thing is if you appoint somebody, they spend a lot of time, coming and saying, hey, this is what I think and this is what I want to do, and then it may be for naught. So that's kind of hard to ask them to, so if you're going to ask them to apply to be appointed, my thought was like, well, apply and ask the electors of the city to appoint you. And then you're set for the remainder of the term. So if you appointed somebody that it would only go in, if we appointed somebody, it would only go until the next election.
No, so that would be 2 years.
2 years, they would stay.
But then do
right?
they swap out though in November?
Yeah. Yeah.
They're like, yeah. So. And I would really prefer to have somebody set and ready to go and not have to worry about a petition and then other things going on. So that's my theory on it. So that, we can know we're going to have a special election. Everybody knows when the dates are going to be. People can prepare if they want to run. And away we go.
Yeah, that's the part that, really had me torn was, when the mayor brought that point up, and I agree 100%. But to your point,
So
that could not occur if somebody petitioned.
So, just for clarification, tonight, if we said we want to go ahead with a special election, that date will be set. What's the time frame from if we say tonight?
March 15th. If you say it tonight, it'll happen on March 15th.
March 15th, okay.
Yeah.
Counselor Sittig, what do you think?
I understand all the arguments for and against, and I haven't heard anyone calling for a special election. I think anyone who wants to force a special election better have a pretty good reason for doing so if they didn't run in November. Honestly, I don't know. I mean, I agree with you that I think we need to have someone soon, and we want to have someone for our goal setting, but at the same time, don't know why we would have a special election. I mean, I understand appointments can be messy, and it all depends on, I think we have to probably come up with some way for that appointment to happen, whether it's an application process or we go handpick people. I don't know. I don't know what our process would be. But that's what we're here to do, is to manage the policy and make these big decisions. So,
Right.
I'm torn, honestly.
So I think there's a couple of things. The process by making an appointment is really whatever we want it to be. Brian and I have sat through that process. You've been a member of that. You've been on the receiving end of it, so you know what that process was like. You know, we have a process. It's not as if it's never been done before, so it's pretty easy to recreate that. To Brian's point, and Brent can attest, it's it's uncomfortable. It's a process, but it's gonna be uncomfortable in any process that we put in place for that to happen. We didn't have anybody else running for city council. So right now and that was an easier thing when we made Brent's appointment, is that he was already running and he was already there and he was clearly just a few votes behind, and it was a pretty, the public had already spoken in that way. So making that appointment really, yeah, it was on us, but the public had already had an opportunity to get to know Brent in his campaigning and in that election. So there wasn't a lot of anything that we had to do from a process standpoint that was difficult or uncomfortable. It could have been more uncomfortable, but it wasn't at that point in time. So I think I'd rather us leave this meeting tonight with a direction on how we want to go, because these days tick on. It just puts more pressure on us. If we don't meet in March for this group meeting, which is still a goal of mine, it gives us more runway for the next 2 years, whatever we have left. It probably will just move that meeting into May, I'm guessing, or a little bit further. It gives you all as a council just a little bit less time to have your say in the vision for North Liberty. So can we get to a point where we have a decision on what we want to do tonight?
Well, I think, my preferential way is to have an election and let the voters pick who they would like to finish that 2-year term, because it's quite a while. So I would move that, and then we could decide what to do.
Can we take motions and have action like that, or do we just need simple consensus?
You'll need to take a motion for
Okay.
this. And so, if you want to count that as a motion, you need a second to hold a
Okay.
special election.
Okay. I will just go through this process with you all. It's been moved that we have a special election. Having a second only allows us to have conversation and to take a vote on that. So
I'll second that for that.
You'll second that? Thank you, Eric. So now, any other discussion, things that we can hash this out now. We thumb wrestle, whatever you want to do on this, and then we'll take a vote.
So we're voting on whether to have a special election?
Correct. And a yes is having a special election. A no is not a special election. And to Brent's point, if we're a tie vote, then that motion fails. Correct?
Yeah, you need to have a majority to pass a motion.
And a no actually just is a no, not a decision.
Correct.
Yeah.
We haven't ever formally adopted Robert's Rules of Order, but you would want to, call the previous question if you wanted to ask it again, or to review or amend the.
Well, to
so,
have another one, so.
I would recommend just a normal conversational tone for these things, and I'll try to help you out if there's any procedural things, but.
So before we move any further, within an appointment, we can say, like, I choose to appoint whoever, or that person has to apply. Like, right?
You can appoint anyone you want. They don't have to accept.
Okay.
Right? And so what I would recommend is that a motion that would be out of order right now to appoint one. So I move that we fill the vacancy on the council with by appointment at our meeting on February 8th, or at our meeting on February 22nd, or at our a special meeting that we'll hold on some other day. That would be a way to move that, and then second and three, and then I would turn around and tell the county auditor that that's what you decided, maybe tonight, probably tomorrow morning. That's the method for doing that. Is that responsive?
Yeah,
Okay.
that helps. I was asking for myself, but also for clarification for people that's like, well, how does this process actually
So,
work?
yeah, you don't have to name the individual right now. It would be, you'd have to, but you would have to come to an agreement, I suppose, at the time you so do it. If that fails, then eventually the 60-day clock will pass, right? If the body can't come to an agreement on who to appoint or how it's done.
I think as per the last one that I was part of, there was an advertisement for application. Counselors that were currently seated hit the pavement and went out and rattled some doors, had some coffees with individuals that they thought would be good, counselors that, and had people apply. So I think that's part of your question too. Can someone up here move and motion to appoint Robert Smith? Sure, we could. It'd need a second, and if that's who we voted on and appointed, we could appoint Robert Smith. Or, it's the folks in the gallery that have applied through the process that we advertise for. Is that true, Grant?
Yeah.
Does that help? Okay.
Yeah.
Any other discussion or questions on this? You okay, Eric? You okay?
I'm doing fine, yeah.
Okay, good. All right.
Just trying to figure out what I'm gonna do.
I know. All right. Maybe Tracy can rattle up the order and make you last on, I don't know. I'm just kidding. Don't do that. Do whatever you need to. I know
For
it's
the
random.
record, I do these beforehand. So
I
you
know it's all random. All right, so it's been moved and seconded that we recommend a special election. Tracy, roll call, please.
Harrington,
Aye.
Smith,
No.
Wason,
Aye.
Siddiq.
Aye.
Was that an aye?
Mm-hmm.
Motion carries. Congratulations, council. That was a big decision. And I'm not saying that flippantly, because it was. It was a really big and important decision for you all to go through.
I would just say, Mayor, I appreciate the dynamic here, and the dynamic always changes anytime a new person comes on, that we're able to have civil discourse, discuss things, and move the city business forward. So I'm proud to be part of a team that can do that and make those hard decisions like that.
Very well said. We take that for granted sometimes. All right. So do we need to do anything else then, Grant? We've got marching orders.
I'm not going to send the email until you adjourn, no.
Okay. All right. All right. That was outstanding work, you guys. I think our city is going to benefit from having some certainty here in this. All right.
Can I just say that was a very difficult decision? I know when we talk about appointment and special election and looking in our community to see who's invested and would make a potential great council member, and I'm pretty sure there's a number of people that probably could. So I don't take that for granted, or just to say like totally discredit anyone that previously ran. And it is one that I probably lost sleep over trying to make a decision to be, fair and give people opportunities. But from me personally, knowing that the process, there's not a real process. It's kind of like we can make that up, and that worries me because I don't think, it puts a lot of pressure on us to come up with what that process is on our own versus knowing that someone can go and vote on their own. So just to just reiterate why it was a little more difficult to make that decision, like just right out the gate. So
Especially for 2 years.
yeah.
Okay. Council, thank you for that discussion and for some finality on how we're going to move forward now. Item 19, any old business? Goodness, has there been something we haven't discussed that you want to discuss tonight?
Bourbon chicken.
Please,
No.
no. Hopefully they're
Mute,
inside warm
mute his
somewhere.
microphone, please. Item 20 then is new business. We've got a pretty good calendar in front of us. Anything new for the council, for the city?
The emergency management meeting is Thursday. I'll be attending that.
Thank you for doing that for us, by the way. All right. I'm going to make a new thing here tonight. I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn. I never liked the mayor dropping the hammer and closing discussion. So could I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Oh, I heard that twice. That must mean we get to second it. Everyone that's in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
There we go. Thank you all.
Thank you.